Hello everyone, it's been a while but here we are again. Here are the next 10 titles in my top 100 JRPGs of all time. Today we're starting at number 40 and counting down to 31, and this is where we're starting to get into the masterpiece territory. If you missed out on all of the other videos, you can check them out in the info or the comments below. And as always, here's the fine print. This is just my personal list and it will be different to yours. I haven't played every JRPG out there and this list constantly changes as time goes on. I would also love to know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Do you think something's too high? Is something too low? I'd love to hear what you think. Some of these entries will also be grouped together if they're related in some way and if I feel they're around the same mark in terms of quality. And finally, if you got any enjoyment at all out of this video, hitting that like button, the super thanks or commenting would help me out big time. You could also sub for more JRPG content, including the next installment of this top 100. I also have a full review out for most of these titles, so check out my previous videos if you're interested. Alright, let's get into it. I've been slaying monsters with oversized swords since 2002, so the thought of befriending these giant creatures and having them fight alongside me took a little while to adjust to. But once I did, I could not get enough of breeding, training, and riding on these ferocious beasts that I've been familiar with for the past 20 odd years. Monster Hunter Stories is a spin-off series of the hugely popular Monster Hunter series. The story begins with the mysterious mass disappearance of Rathalos, which are probably the most well-known monsters in the series. Upon investigating this, your character is met by a strange white-haired girl who entrusts you with a Rathalos egg. This Rathalos, conveniently named Ratha, is soon discovered to be a creature destined to bring ruin to the world. Your character will progress through several large areas of the world, investigating the mysteries of the missing Rathalos and learning the truth behind your Ratha. The main narrative is surprisingly fun, and it does a great job in setting up countless moments that allow these beasts that made the series so popular plenty of opportunity to shine. But I think my favourite thing about Wings of Ruin is the amazing turn-based battle system. The core mechanic behind this combat is choosing which type of attack to hit the enemy with: power, speed, or technical, and these work in a rock, paper, scissors fashion. Choosing the right type of attack is the key to every victory, but the challenge is that each enemy's attack patterns will change. This means that you'll have to constantly switch in the right monsters from your roster of 6 for each situation. And that brings us to the monsters themselves. Once you find an egg in a monster's den, it can be hatched in town, with each hatched monstie starting at level 1. These monsters will naturally grow stronger by being in your party or when sending them out on expeditions, but it's the gene system that really allows you to customize these beasts to your liking. I loved how this system works, as it really makes you carefully think about which monsters to keep, which ones to develop, and which ones to sacrifice. Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin is what happens when you breed a Pokemon game with a mainstream Monster Hunter title, and the result, an absolute killer JRPG that seems to have flown under the radar of many. The Breath of Fire series is one that fans have been screaming for new life for many years, and there's a good reason for that. This series has some absolute killer titles, and it's such a crime that many modern gamers don't really have an easy way to play them. Breath of Fire 4 has always been my personal favourite in the series, and I have such fond memories of playing it as a kid. The game starts with Nina and Cray shipwrecked in the middle of a desert when they come across a large dragon who transforms into a young man. As you would expect, this is Ryu, and he doesn't remember anything, so he decides to tag along with Nina. Meanwhile, the ancient Emperor Fulu rises from his burial chambers after hundreds of years with the intention of retaking the world. Breath of Fire 4 tells its story through these two different points of view, with both characters' paths eventually crossing. I have always loved games with this narrative style. Now, the turn-based combat is something that I felt really reached its peak in Breath of Fire 4. You can take 3 party members into battle but can switch in your reserves at any time. This provides a great incentive to use all 6 characters, particularly because switching between them doesn't come at any cost. And then, of course, we have Ryu, who has the unique ability of turning into a dragon, which is a staple of the series. But putting the great story and combat aside, there are plenty of other reasons why Breath of Fire 4 is one of the best. Starting with the Masters, these are NPCs who are willing to teach you what they know if the right conditions are met. For example, Cryrick will teach you a skill if you perform a 30-hit combo in one turn, and then another skill if you perform a 40-hit combo, and so on. Finding these masters, meeting the requirements, and taking advantages of their unique bonuses in battle was a clear standout feature of the game. And who could forget the fairy village system that allows you to build a village and assign different jobs to its fairy inhabitants, and the fishing system, which is easily my favourite fishing minigame of all time. Breath of Fire 4 has a lot to offer and is an absolute must play if you're into timeless classics. One of the best video game surprises that I have ever had was when I discovered Valkyria Chronicles for the first time. It was unlike any other RPG I had ever played in my life. The combination of its outstanding story and addictive strategic war-inspired gameplay was incredible, and I've been following this series ever since. The game follows Welkin Gunther, a young lieutenant leading Squad 7, who are a militia unit fighting to defend Galia from the Imperial forces. Valkyria Chronicles' unique method of comic book-like storytelling and meaningful cutscenes make for some absolutely awesome moments that easily rival most JRPGs acclaimed for their stories. There is plenty of mystery and loads of twists and turns that kept me glued to my screen, along with a cast of outstanding characters who all have their time to shine. Seriously, this game is up there in the top tier of gaming stories. And then there's the gameplay. In order to progress to the next chapter, you'll need to pit your forces against the enemy in a large-scale war. This requires you to carefully select the most appropriate soldiers from your large squad and complete the mission objective, which will be something along the lines of capturing the enemy camps or eliminating everyone on the battlefield. Every single move that you make will have to be carefully thought out. Should you try to barge through the enemy fire with your trooper class soldier or pick off a single enemy commander with your sniper? You will face decisions like this constantly, and for every success or mistake that you make, you will be that much more prepared if a similar situation arises in the future. This game will make you the elite military strategist that you've always dreamt of being since you were in diapers. There's also a huge emphasis on managing your troops and choosing the right ones for each battle. Each soldier has a specific class, and each of these classes has their own strengths and weaknesses. Some of these include scouts, who can cover a lot of ground each turn but have a relatively low attack power, and lancers, who carry large rocket launchers around and are essential for destroying enemy tanks. In addition to a class, each soldier also has unique potentials that affect how they perform on the battlefield, and these can be both positive and negative. There is a lot to think about and many ways to handle each situation, which is exactly how a quality SRPG should be. If you missed out on this masterpiece back in the day, you can try out the remastered version available on the PS4 and Switch. Ever since this highly successful Kickstarter campaign back in 2020, the hype for this gorgeous retro-style RPG was massive, and it did not disappoint. Sea of Stars really is a love letter to Super Nintendo-era JRPGs with clear inspirations from games like Chrono Trigger, Super Mario RPG, and Lufia 2. The first thing I'll say about Sea of Stars is that it's absolutely gorgeous, but you don't need me to tell you that. Just look at it. And this may be hard to believe, but the soundtrack is just as good. It is perfect in retaining those retro vibes with some absolute banger battle themes too. Sea of Stars centers around Zale and Valir, two children of the solstice who have the ability to harness the powers of the sun and the moon. These two protagonists will eventually team up with others and travel around the world to save it from its impending doom. The story here is one of the strongest parts of Sea of Stars, and it really feels like the kind of journeys that I used to go on in my favourite retro RPGs of the past. The writing is brilliant, and I was always so engaged with what was going on, with the next big dose of plot progression always only a dungeon away. Sea of Stars' world is divided into continents, each with their own dungeons, towns, fishing spots, and other locations to explore. Emphasis on the word explore, because exploring each and every one of these locations and finding the many secrets was one of the highlights of the game. When it comes to the combat system, it is clearly inspired by Chrono Trigger. During your turn, you can choose any of your 3 characters to act. There is no traditional turn order on display here. Instead, a turn countdown will indicate when your enemies will attack, and this is displayed by a number next to the sprite. One of the coolest features of this system is timing your attacks and blocks, and this reminded me a lot of Super Mario RPG and Final Fantasy VIII's Gunblade attacks, which are my jam. This combat works incredibly well and shines particularly bright during the boss fights. Most of the major bosses have their own sort of strategy that you'll need to work out, and defeating them always felt rewarding. If looking at all this eye candy and listening to me praise this game for the past couple of minutes isn't enough to make you want to play Sea of Stars, then I don't know what will. Sea of Stars is an incredible JRPG and so worthy of a spot so high on my list. I don't know how or why it happened, but Parasite Eve was a game that got away from me during the PS1 era. It wasn't until a few years ago that I could finally say that I completed this horror-themed classic. Parasite Eve is so highly regarded for a reason, and as a hardcore 90s RPGer, it is so easy to see why. The game begins with a young detective Aya attending an opera. In what can only be described as the most eventful opera possible, the lead actress Melissa goes a little crazy and sets everyone in the audience alight. This mass murder left no survivors, except for Aya, who somehow manages to escape unharmed. The entire game revolves around Aya investigating this and other supernatural events around Manhattan. To put it simply, this dark themed story had me hooked from the start, and it did not let me go. The whole visual style of Parasite Eve is brilliant, or at least it would have been for its time. The pre-rendered backgrounds are all detailed and unique, and the dark visual style helps create a feeling of hopelessness and unease. This is especially evident when the entire city is forced to evacuate. This leaves Aya and a few other police officers up against a supernatural entity that you know nothing about. Now, the combat is one of the coolest things about Parasite Eve. Aya can perform an action whenever the ATB fills up at the top of the screen, but what's interesting is that while filling it, you're able to control Aya around the battlefield. Trying to dodge enemy attacks and choosing when to attack is such a vital part of battle. The main method of dishing out damage is through Aya's firearms, but she can also use her PE abilities to cast support spells. This works well because PE will naturally regenerate as the battle progresses, which makes timing their use so important. The combat here is really awesome, with some of the boss battles being very memorable. Fans have been raving about Parasite Eve for years, and rightfully so. It is a great game and one that I was able to thoroughly enjoy without the need for nostalgia goggles. Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch was without a doubt one of the standout JRPGs from the PS3 era, which was during a time when the genre was in a bit of a slump. This game instantly received a load of hype due to its collaboration with Studio Ghibli. They are the studio that made Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, and all of those other masterpiece animes. It really doesn't take long to see the quality of their films carried over to the game. Ni no Kuni did not spare any expense. The story begins in the town of Motorville, where Oliver and his friends are busy working on a car. Just like any other teenager, Oliver decides to disobey his mother and sneak out at night in order to give the car a test run. This didn't turn out so well, as within seconds the car crashes nose first into a lake. Fortunately, Oliver is saved by his mother, but she later dies as a result of saving her son. As you would expect, Oliver is a mess and tries to shut himself off from the world. Then, the magic happens. Oliver's tears magically springs his favourite doll Drippy into life. Drippy soon introduces Oliver to a parallel world in which only he can save it from the evil wizard Shadar. The story is quite simple and cruises in third gear until the final third of the game when you're hit with a load of twists and turns, and this is where the story hits its peak. While this story can be childish at times, I did find a lot of enjoyment with it. Now, the fantasy world of Ni no Kuni is absolutely perfect, with few JRPGs up until that point giving me such enjoyment in its world map exploration. The desire to explore every inch of the world and uncover all the secrets really took me back to the PS1 Final Fantasy titles. This world is also littered with creatures called familiars who you can catch, customize, evolve, and use to fight in battle. Kicking ass with these little critters is a load of fun. Each of the 3 main characters can equip 3 familiars at a time, and they can be rotated as many times as needed, and they also share the same HP and MP pool. Each turn your familiars can attack, use an ability or a defensive maneuver, and these are governed by cooldowns. There's also HP, MP and golden orbs that often scatter throughout the battlefield, so it pays off to have an awareness of your surroundings. Managing your MP is one of the key strategies in battle, as without it you won't be able to heal. I have so many fond memories of playing Ni no Kuni for the first time, and I'll always remember it for how beautiful it looks and sounds. If you did miss out on this classic, there was a remaster for modern consoles and PC. This next entry refers to the entire Cold Steel arc from the Trail series, which is probably the most well known out of them all. I had the PS4 version of Cold Steel 1 laying around for over a year before I finally decided to see what the Trail series was all about. And from there, I was completely hooked and proceeded to play through all 8 of the lengthy games that were released at that point in time. The 4 titles in the Cold Steel arc are set in Erebonia, a massive country with a load of problems. The biggest of which is the internal tension between the noble factions and the imperial government, but also the uncertain relations with nearby countries and other groups. You play the role of Reen, who starts off as a first-year student at the widely renowned Thor's Military Academy. Reen and 8 other students are soon placed in Class 7, a new experimental sort of class who have a different kind of curriculum. I'm not going to say anything else because I don't want to spoil anything, but I can tell you that a lot happens through the course of these 4 games. The nutshell version is that Reen and his classmates eventually get caught up in a massive conflict, and slowly watching this unfold is an experience like no other. Emphasis on the word slow. These Trails games, and the whole series in general, are slow burners. There is a lot of dialogue, major character development, and loads of time spent setting up the world and teaching you about the lore. At times, it may seem that nothing is happening for hours, but this is also what makes the storytelling so effective. When Cold Steel hits, it hits hard, with some absolutely sensational scenes and events. The same can be said about the colourful cast of characters. Watching them grow and learning more and more about them over the 4 Cold Steel titles was an absolute treat. These are some of my all-time favourite characters. Story aside, Cold Steel is a quality JRPG in all of the other areas that matter. The turn-based combat is very strategic and improves greatly over the course of the series. The RPG mechanics also allow for a load of tinkering, and this is one of those games that it is very easy to absolutely break through some good customization. Then there's the soundtrack, which is full of banger after banger. The Falcom sound team once again show why they're one of the best in the business. I do understand that the Cold Steel series, or the entire Trail series in general, may be daunting to get into, but if you do get the time and enjoy a slow burner with outstanding characters, deep lore and incredible payoff, then few games will do it better than Trails of Cold Steel. Next up, we have an absolute beast of an SRPG, Tactics Ogre Reborn. Before we get into it, here's a bit of context. Tactics Ogre Let Us Clean Together is a PSP remake of the Japanese exclusive Tactics Ogre released on the Super Famicom in 1995. Fast forward to 2022 and a remaster of the PSP remake titled Tactics Ogre Reborn was born. Now, Reborn is one of those very meaty remasters with loads of changes that both enhances the original experience and also changes up the gameplay significantly. The game takes place on the Isles of Valeria following the death of its king. The problem is, he didn't name a successor, and this leads to a civil war between 3 groups. You play the role of Denham, a young Wellister who, with his sister and best friend, joined the Wellister Resistance. If you're into complex political narratives full of lore, twists and turns, then this game will deliver. Something that I really liked about the story is that throughout the 4 chapters, the storyline will branch depending on your decisions during key scenes. These decisions will not only have a huge impact on following events, but will also dictate which characters you can recruit to your side. There are loads that can be recruited, most of which are easily missable. The combat works exactly the way you'd expect from an SRPG. Characters can move through the gridded map based on their movement stat and then either attack or use a skill or magic spell that consumes TP. There are a decent amount of classes too, and finding the right mix and maximizing their effectiveness is crucial. One of the most significant new additions to Reborn is buff cards, and this is an absolute game changer. There are 4 types of cards that randomly generate over the battlefield, and these buffs last for the remainder of the battle. This combat is highly addictive, but can also be very difficult, especially since there are level caps at different points in the game. If you're a fan of the genre, playing Tactics Ogre Reborn is an absolute no-brainer and goes down as one of my favourite SRPGs ever. The Legend of Dragoon was one of my favourite PS1 RPGs as a kid. While this game may be 25 years old, it still manages to blow me away and is easily in the category of classics that you just gotta play. I absolutely love the atmosphere that the game creates, mostly due to the pre-rendered backgrounds that were breathtaking for its time and really helped bring the locations to life. FMV sequences were one of my favourite parts of RPGs of the era, and the sheer amount of them easily rivaled Final Fantasy games at the time. They are just so cool in all of their standard definition glory. The Legend of Dragoon centres around Dart, who is on his way back home to Celis after going on a 5-year journey to track down a mysterious black monster who killed his parents and destroyed his birth city. After narrowly escaping an attack from a mysterious dragon, he arrives home only to discover that it's been destroyed by the Imperial Army, who have also kidnapped his childhood friend Shana. While setting out to save her, he obtains a Dragoon spirit which allows him to turn into a Dragoon. Dragoons are basically chosen by fate to rule over dragons, who were a huge part of the Dragon campaign 11,000 years ago. Following a bunch of kick-ass Dragoons fight an ultimate evil is just as enjoyable for me today as it was all those years ago. The turn-based combat system is pretty standard except for one major mechanic, the addition system. When a character attacks, they don't just attack, oh no, they addition. An addition is basically a set of attacks that requires you to manually hit X at the right time. Failure to do so and your addition combo will stop, meaning less damage will be dealt. I loved this, as it will always require you to pay attention, even during regular battles. Once your characters have built up enough SP, they can transform into Dragoons. When in this form, their stats are majorly buffed and they can also unleash powerful magic spells. Now, it may seem like the Dragoon form will always be the way to go, but that's not always the case. You see, Dragoons cannot use items, which means healing would be out of the question. Therefore, choosing who to turn into a Dragoon and when is a key factor that always needs to be considered. The Legend of Dragoon is an incredible game, and for such a popular quality title, I am surprised that more hasn't ever been done with the series. Fingers crossed that we get something soon. At number 31, we have the third mainline title in the Suikoden series. Released in 2002 for the PS2, Suikoden 3 is a follow-up to what many people consider as the best JRPG of all time. This one did things very differently though, which was a bit of a shock to fans of the series, but personally, I loved it all. For starters, this entry was the first to be entirely 3D, which was a stark change from the traditional 2D sprites. Then there's the story, which offers a very unique way to progress the narrative through its Trinity Sight system. The game takes place in the Grasslands, a region caught in conflict between various factions. However, rather than watching events unfold from a single main character's point of view, you'll need to play through the game from 3 different perspectives. There's Hugo, a young warrior from the Karaya clan, Chris Lightfellow, a knight of Zaxxon, and Ghetto, a mercenary working for Harmonia. Being able to see events unfold from different points of view creates some incredible moments. When their paths all eventually come together, wowee, I will never forget that event. Suikoden 3's combat is also a lot different from its predecessors. While you can still take 6 party members into battle, they'll need to be paired up and respond to shared actions. This really makes you think about which type of characters you should pair up together. Oh, and you can also mount creatures in battle. This was so cool to me back in the day. Then, of course, you have everything else that makes the Suikoden series so amazing. There's 108 different characters to recruit. There's a HQ that grows as more characters join your cause. There's strategic large-scale war battles and also intense 1 vs 1 duels. Overall, Suikoden 3 is an absolutely outstanding game, and there was a time when it was my favourite in the series. With the way that the series is being revived at the moment, I think it's only a matter of time before the 3rd in the series gets the remaster treatment. This would be the perfect time to play this masterpiece if you haven't already. That is 70 games down now, and we are getting so close to the end. What did you think of this list? Was something too high? Was something too low? Is there anything here that you want to play? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to know more about any of these games, I've got full reviews out for most of them, so be sure to check out my channel. This was Hellfire RPGs, thanks for watching. It would help out this channel so much if you could hit like, comment or sub for more RPG content coming soon. And of course, the next episode of 21 to 30 is going to be out soon, so make sure you stay tuned for that. See you next time.